it's been a lot of injustice done to men as well, that whoever keeps reinforcing the structure and these ideas are people that obviously excel in that kind of thing.
Hello, Beate, and welcome to Real Men Feel.
I'm so excited to be here, Andy. I cannot wait.
Well, good, because the waiting is over. Here we are.
Ta-da!
So you call yourself a growth architect. Can you tell us what that actually means?
Yes, so I'm the person that comes in and helps with strategic plans, tools, tricks, techniques, blueprints to design growth architecture for organizations, teams, and businesses.
Cool. So, I know that you have an extensive background in business. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I originally come from the creative arts. So my only degree is really photography, and I always been better at the business side behind it. So for me, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the way my brain works. But I always saw it's like, okay, that's very easy. We got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, here are the bullet points and here are the modules. Here's the formula. Here's the system. And people say, how do you do that? And I said, well, doesn't everybody know how to do that? And that's how I figured out that I have the gift when it comes to these types of strategic things. And I was a photo editor, and I was a producer and a photographer and a stock photography agency owner. And I sold that. And then I went in service of helping people be more successful and make their impact with what they are really good at.
Cool. And how did that become something that you even cared about? Like, what is it about helping others achieve and make a bigger impact? What about that spoke to you in some way?
So the story is really, my story is not the princess story. So this doesn't read like, one day I woke up a princess and then a lot of great things happened. Somebody handed me the crown and that was it. Life was happy, happy hunky dory after that. It really wasn't. My story is the unruly kid that went out to conquer the world with a big idea or no idea at all, but anything but this in Germany. And so I was able to create a lot of adversity for myself, some of which were my own decisions, some of which were not my decisions, like, September 11th, tsunami, fires, floods, riots, earthquake, death. You name it. I kind of covered it. And now lucky me, got to add the pandemic on top of it. Who knew that that would be coming? And I remember, Andy, when I was going through this, that I thought to myself, somebody's got to derive a benefit out of this at one point, because it's just not normal that one person has to be whiplashed by spirit, God, the universe, to all this adversity. I mean, I said something good must be coming off this. I'm just not quite clear what it is. And that is when I then, after this decade of bad luck, was able to sell my business to Bill Gates for millions of dollars successfully. I realized that there's a lot of nonsense that is being said, not just in the corporate world, but that I felt that people weren't necessarily always honest about some of these things, right? And I set out and I said, I'm going to do my part to help more people be successful by becoming the growth architect and helping them to really map out the blueprints to their own success.
Cool. And when the first time we spoke, you talked about how there's this kind of secret men's code in business. So is discovering that or architecting that, is that part of how you help people, or is dismantling that part of how you help people?
So, again, this is an interesting way to look at it, because at first, as I sold my business, now I'm running, and they offered me a job. So I'm now running the global entertainment division for a Bill Gates company. I mean, good size responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that the structure is built by men for men, and it seems to work really great for men. Well, not all men though, but men who want to conform to that structure and women who want to conform to that structure. But it doesn't really work for women, or it doesn't really work for people that don't like that kind of structure. So at first I walked into this and I said, this structure must be dismantled. And then I realized, and this is really the gift that COVID brought, if you so want to, Andy, is when I looked at, wait a minute, not so fast here. We can't go and say again that the advancement of one group is coming to the at the expense of another group. And that's why the Me Too movement had such a big backlash, because it was, you know, pretty rough for a lot of men, and the language is pretty rough for many men. And it's not true for all men, but a lot of them got caught in the crossfire, and it had terrible consequences for men in their confidence around women. And now I look at this and I'm seeing men who are at home with their families, and they're actually really liking tucking their kids in and spending more time with their family, and experiencing what their wives go through, and having a complete different appreciation for that. And I spoke to women, and women said, oh my God, I never knew that Andy would be such a great dad. I mean, before this, he didn't even have time to tuck the kids in. I never saw him. And I mean, look at him now. I mean, he can't wait, every day from like 2 to 4 o'clock. He books himself out. He spends time with the kids. He wants to be there. It's been the greatest thing ever. And so I thought about, wait, so what we assume that all men are this, all women are that, is not true. And that's when I decided that I had to identify really the men's code, the women's code, and how we bring the two of them together into this new business code.
Cool. And so even identifying this kind of ruling code doesn't mean that it applies to everybody, but speaking for myself, recognizing that code and how men are supposed to operate, I would try to force myself to live that way too, even though it didn't fit me. Does that resonate with you in your experience?
Well, and that's the interesting part. I think that's the message that women haven't heard yet, because I don't think women have realized this to the degree that, I have figured this out now, is that a lot of men that were forced into the structure to succeed because it's the existing structure hated it, disliked it, didn't want to be in a perpetual competition, didn't like that they constantly had to watch their back, didn't like that it was always about winning, and and who's got the ear, who's in proximity of the decision maker, how can you convince them, can you be on the golf course, are you at the right time at the happy hour at the club? I mean, this isn't really right for most men either, but yet men felt compelled because that was what was written in the men's code. And so you're absolutely correct, is that when I realized that this idea that I had assumed was the truth, that most men liked it, because why otherwise would they keep operating in it, was actually not even true.
Yeah, I find more and more, the more shows I do, the longer I live my life, I find that more and more men, we're driven by fear that we're even afraid to acknowledge. But it's that, well, I better follow this norm. I better conform to this structure, or else I'll be seen as different. And that's a scary thing. I'll be ostracized. I won't be a man if I don't follow the men code at work and in business and in every aspect of life.
Right. And which is why I wanted to be on your podcast, because I really felt that there was a conversation you and I can have, with a certain amount of honesty, to say there really has been a lot of injustice done to men as well, that whoever keeps reinforcing the structure, and these ideas, are people that obviously excel in that kind of thing. And so this small group of whatever extroverted, hard charging alphas, winning at all cost, right? They run everything. And it comes not just at a huge price for, let's just say, non-conforming people, but for a lot of men who don't want to live like this. And you're absolutely right. That's why I think men are so stressed out, and why men are working as hard as they do, because they feel that they have to conform to this ideal of the hard charging alpha, because God forbid you're found out that you feel something, or you have emotions, and then what? And then you be called a softie, or what's even the consequence of that? And honestly, for anyone to say that you're so emotional, what bullshit is that? because of course you have emotions. I mean, that's being human. Anger is emotion.
Mhm.
I mean, we all have emotions. So why wouldn't you be allowed to feel what
Yeah.
you feel?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the secret codes behind Real Men Feel is reminding men that they're human beings. And you don't have emotions by accident or a mistake, and there aren't some emotions that are only for women or some are only for men. Like that's all the nonsense. And I love what you're saying. It's because I find that like most labels and restrictive boxes that anyone places in, it doesn't actually help anyone. But no, it must help. There must be a minority that does thrive in that, and they keep perpetuating it. And then the majority doesn't want to rock the boat, doesn't want to be seen as an outsider, so they try to fit into these rules and this restriction, and until you know things just blow up and the walls can't contain it anymore. And maybe that was the slow burn of more and more women going into society. Maybe for some individuals, it's one of the blessings of the COVID experience. A man is forced to have a different experience than just going to work every day and yelling at people in the office and driving full steam ahead, and had time at home and like, oh, wow, I actually like my family. I didn't know that.
I have better intimacy. I'm connecting with my partner. My kids like me. They don't think I'm some weirdo stranger that only comes from trips with gifts from airports.
Right.
Yes. I mean, what a concept. I think you're making a very important point is that this idea of the group idea, the identifying with a particular group on whether that is black, brown, white, male, female, transgender, or anything kind of in between, right? So the minute I identify with a group, I'm already in bias toward other groups. And anybody who says otherwise lies. I'm sorry. And the reason cancel culture got so bad is because of the reason that we are seeing that people now, when they identify with the ideology of a particular group, now feel compelled to say, finger in your face, here's what you're doing wrong. And to me, the funniest moment, funny, sad, right, was when I was telling my story. And my story is my first husband is and was a black man. My first husband is an alcoholic and a pathological liar. So I said that when I was speaking, I said, well, my first husband, who is black, is an alcoholic and a pathological liar. And then afterward, I was called out by the organizers of the event for a microaggression toward all black men. And I said, oh no, honey, I said, this was no microaggression. I said, this was a macroaggression against one specific person. I said, for someone to even think that you could speak for all black men by saying my ex-husband was a pathological liar and an alcoholic. I mean, it's just ludicrous.
Right.
But it just shows you on how much we have oversensitized people to say, oh, was it politically correct that she's saying? I spoke yesterday. Here's another really great example. I spoke yesterday to a photographer, a client of mine. And he had an incident where he was taking photos under a green fluorescent light. And when there's fluorescent light, your skin gets a green tilt. So he said to the person, I don't like your skin tone under this light. You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he got called in by the HR. It made it all the way to the HR department.
Wow.
From this large company that says, we had some feedback about you are having a problem with one of our employees' skin tones. And he goes like, what? No, I said that fluorescent light is green and it makes everyone's skin green. Well, maybe in the future, maybe you could formulate this a little bit softer, like saying, I don't like this light. Don't give it judgment. What? That's where we are right now.
Yeah.
In this oversensitized community of people who know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I always felt like identify with whatever you want, but the moment you're only identifying with that, like we are all aspects of all things, like every type of energy and archetype, it's all making us all up. So anytime we make those sharp lines, anytime we're adding division between people, I mean, that's the the continued downfall of us as a whole, of society.
I couldn't agree
Mm.
with you anymore. And that's why, again, I really like what you do, Andy, because you go in and you just go in from with just a simple statement, real men feel. And that by itself is already controversial because
Mm.
what does it mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And let me take a chance to explain it here. And what I mean real as in authentic and genuine. It doesn't mean that if you're a man who's not in touch with his feelings, that you're somehow not a man. No, because that's usually the feedback given back to men who do feel that they're not men. They're somehow turned. I was on a show early this year, and I kept being asked, "Why are you turning men into women, Andy?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm inviting men to be human beings, which just means they'll be happier and healthier, and everyone around them will do better." But yeah, we are. So many people are just digging harder into identities and making more division and separation. But there are people like you and me and other guests and listeners that are trying to fight that tide and bring people together because there's so many cliches that are true, but we are all more powerful together. Like the whole world will be a better place as we come together, not in making more divisions and separation and blaming and pointing whatever the other is in that moment of our experience.
I like that, Andy, because I think in the end, the idea is to remove the label and to say, um, because right now what's happening is it's almost like there's like so many groups now, that you have to constantly watch what you're saying. And because everybody has a label on what they believe in. I say black, brown says, what about me? I say brown, Asian says, what about me? I say Asian, white says, what about me? So, this is whiplash of just insanity. I
Mm.
mean, I can't describe it any other way. But what if, we actually do exactly what you're suggesting? It's like, what if we look at the person? And what if I say, well, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking about this? And really allowing each other that softness and that vulnerability. There's a great line I heard once. Somebody says, "It doesn't matter what a tough guy you are. When your daughter's pink telephone rings, you pick up."
Yep. Very true. That's great.
And so, if that is the truth, which I know it is, right? And how many guys have I seen in airports, like the big bodybuilder guys, and they couldn't be more trained than they're carrying these teeny little Barbie backpacks for their daughters, right? That's not particularly masculine, but maybe what if it is particularly masculine
Yeah.
to own that and say, hey, that's my baby girl, and my baby girl gets to have as many Barbie backpacks, and if she can carry it, I'll carry it to her anytime
Yeah.
on my
Yeah.
pinky if I have to,
Yeah.
right?
I often say that the only definition of masculinity that matters is yours.
Yes.
And you judge it by deciding, does it feel good to me or not? Do I feel restricted? Am I not able to be myself? Like, my definition of masculinity lets me do anything. And whatever I do is masculine by definition that I, as a man, am doing it. That's it.
Do you think, I'm going to have to ask you this question, do you think that the definition of masculinity is either under attack or threatened or changing or all of the above?
I don't think it's under attack. I think it's changing, and it's always been changing. The people that feel under attack are people attached to one hard definition. They want, and there are people that are comfortable with rigidity.
Yeah.
They don't want change, flexibility, and it can all scare them. And again, so many men are driven by fear, and it's an unconscious fear. They would deny to their last breath that they're afraid of anything, which proves they're afraid of being seen as having any fear or any weakness.
That is so true. I remember an ex-boyfriend of mine, we were driving in the car, and then he started complaining about a friend of his. And then my partner at the time turned around and said, Alex, don't be like a girl. And my head like flew. And I said, I'm sorry, what did you just say? I said, I said, think about the message you're just giving to your son, that having an opinion or an experience about something that clearly bothered him about a human interaction with another person is inappropriate. And if he has and if he feels that he's been wronged, he's too feminine, and that's bad. I said, I mean, where do you even come up with this?
Yeah. Well, again, taught generations and generations. So the people that feel masculinity is under attack is the ones that, they're somehow being confronted with passing on rules like that. And, this podcast could easily just be called Humans. Because that's the
Humans feel.
truth. Yeah,
Yes.
because we do. And, men feel, it can drop the real. But yeah, it's we're this niche culture, this identity politics. There's so many different phrases, and even using those labels makes adding to the separation and structure. So people will have opinions. People can have whatever opinion they want, but when your opinion creates walls and makes you point and blame everyone else, my life was miserable until I realized I had to take responsibility for it. It's easier to feel like a victim. It's easier to blame everyone else. But when I said, whatever happened until now, I take responsibility for what comes next. I have to create my life. Just simply reacting to things is not a healthy life. And it comes into all of these things. But anytime if you're living by someone's code and it's not yours, you're probably setting yourself up for some pain, for running into some walls, for being obstructed by truly what you want to do, what calls to you, that hunch, that intuition, that instinctual drive to feel good. Life is meant to be enjoyed, and so many men are not taught that at
No,
all.
no, you're absolutely correct. And I think it is that the structure for women is pretty clearly defined, right? Be seen but not heard, be the good girl, don't ask for too much, don't eat that last cookie, make sure you look good, that your body looks good, don't be a fat girl. So we got a lot of this external stuff going on how we're supposed to behave and look like.
Mhm.
And I think for a man that there's a whole other set of rules. My brother, who is not an alpha male, I mean, never has been. My brother is an introvert. My brother is very sensitive. He's very empathetic. And so he struggled in the insurance business because he could never be that closer, the hard closer, because that's not his thing. But what happens is, if you don't have the awareness, develop the awareness like you did, then you turn that inward and it erodes your confidence.
Yeah.
And once your confidence goes, you're dead in the water, because then how do you get out of that? Then you have the depression, the not sleeping, your relationships are failing, and you cannot figure it out, all because you cannot admit to yourself that whatever it is because you're allowing that to dictate how you're supposed to feel. And because you're really not feeling that way, you always have that discrepancy between what you want to feel, who you really are, and what they're telling you and how to feel. And they can never come together. And of course, you're going to be a mess in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, that's why the suicide rate keeps climbing for men. Men feel disposable. And so, negative emotions are giving us information. My negative emotions kept telling me that what I'm thinking and taking actions on is not in alignment with what I actually want out of life. But if I'm trying and force myself to be an alpha, to be competitive, to give a crap about, business and only money or whatever it might be, or I need to sleep with every girl that I see, that's what makes a man. All of that, if it's not what feels true to me, is draining my energy. It's leading and adding to my depression, to my anxiety, to my misery. And the more I refuse to acknowledge that, to share it, to just even to myself, that if I can't take responsibility for it, and that's the only way I can change anything, then I'm doomed. I'm a survivor of multiple suicide attempts, and it was all this, so much trying to be someone else. And long before COVID, most men were wearing masks and would never want to admit that they were wearing a mask, and couldn't confess to anyone that they were wearing a mask, and trying so hard to fit in. And so much of male society, it's third grade recess. You don't want to be picked last for a game. You don't want to be picked on. You want to be bullied. All these things to avoid pain. So I think that avoidance of pain is what I believe causes so many men to shut down all emotions, because they don't know how to deal with any of them. So we just deny them all.
That makes an unbelievable amount of sense, and just talking to you, really, to me, like, in my head, I have scenarios now that I'm running where I can really see that. Because which meeting have we ever been to where where a man asks another man, and how do you feel about that, Andy?
Yeah.
The question is, how is this going to help us to be more productive?
Right.
How is this going to help us be more effective? How is this going to help the bottom line? But you are absolutely correct that I think within some of these things, our issues are a society that women have now been and in no small responsibility given to the media, but trained to look at all men as X or most men as X. And now we're seeing the reverse on the male side, where now on the media for men, it's like, well, all women are like that. And I get a lot of it on my YouTube channel. I sadly I've been branded the feminist whose fault it is that the world is where it's at, right? Which couldn't be further from the truth, because I love men. And I do believe that we have to acknowledge the strength that each of us brings to the table, and then take that and say, you know what, Andy, when you're really charging hard, I love that. Don't let me stop you. And then when you see something, you say, well, Beate, I really liked on the thoughtfulness on how you did that. And then you do something. I said, oh my God, that was so empathetic. I could never be that, because I'm process and strategy oriented. So that's my go-to. And then you can say, well, your strategy really worked on that one, but did you think about how the people feel when you throw them in that system? And then I'm going to say, well, but Andy, if the system works, wouldn't the people be happy? And then you said, well, on that. Um, Now you see how we're shifting our conversation around, not by our traditional roles of how we see this, but now we're shifting this around on our personality types, and we're acknowledging, even though you're a hairy man, and and you could be X, X, and X, and I'm a blonde woman, and I could be X, X, and X, but it's not even true, because you're the one who talks about the feelings. I'm the one who talks about the strategy. So, hey, whoa, wait, what's happening here? Right.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the richness of the experience that's the human experience, is when we really listen. That's when this happens. The beauty happens in
Yeah.
between those moments.
And this requires this back and forth, this openness requires authenticity and vulnerability, which aren't things that are talked about in business, at least any business that I've been in.
Yeah.
And that makes us challenge our fear. Because again, the driven into men, don't be weak. And that's why, so women are seen as weak. So that's why don't be a little girl, because that means you're weak, right? And we're all, every human being is masculine and feminine energy and aspects and skill sets. And we all have the ability to navigate and go back and forth. And the people I've met in my life who are just 100% masculine are wearing the biggest, thickest masks. I know they're not actually happy that way all the time, but they keep sticking with that. They think if I try harder, I'll eventually really be comfortable and how hard I'm working at everything, right? And even women, someone that is 100% femininity all the time, it can be too much of this wilted flower. They're probably getting trampled on over life if they can never have any sort of a hard edge, stand up for themselves anywhere. But we navigate. It's a pendulum swing of energy, thoughts, and beliefs. Unless we're taught that, nope, on the paradigm, you live right here. You get this 1 inch of infinity. You're this 1 inch, and that's all you can be. And that's where we get into so much trouble. But
And that's really sad if you think about it, when you go and you say, is that, do I really have only 1 inch of infinity? That's all I'm giving myself permission to. So the awareness, right? So I think I want to just talk a little bit about awareness, is because when we first start raising the awareness, and you talk about fear a lot, right? Um, Awareness is scary, because you would have to admit to yourself that you're not happy. And so we run to the doctor, we say we're not happy. They give us some Xanax, some, antidepressants, they give us something to sleep. And then we do that until we don't want to live like this anymore, one
until
way or
our
another.
awareness rises again that,
Yeah.
wow, that didn't change anything.
So I looked, I did a webinar on change. And so I looked, there's a curve called the Kubler curve of change. And so when you change, so you go like down this depression and frustration, and then you go kind of to the excitement, inspiration, and then you move into permanent change. And then I looked at the wheel of addiction. It's no different. It's no different. It's just different words on how it's being described, but it's exactly the same thing. You get to the point where you say anything but this. To me, I call this the piece of the pain of staying has to be greater than your fear of change.
Right. Yeah. That's why somebody, I'm always asking people like, why do we have to hit rock bottom to make a change? And it's good. Yeah, the pain has to be so bad that we're willing to
Anything
be
but this.
wrong. That's what it comes
Yes.
down to. And again, it goes back to the fear. Men and humans, and especially if you're a woman trying to be in business, so you're trying to act like a man, well, then you can't be wrong either. It's even, a stricter, there's more eyes on you waiting for you to be wrong so they can just get rid of you, probably, right? Is that part of the female experience at all?
The female experience is that we are told when we are being raised that, as I said, good girls are being seen, not heard, right? To fit in, to not draw unnecessary attention to ourselves, to let the work speak for itself. Yeah, like, because that works in business. And then you get out in the business world and you realize that it's all about, how do I get the attention? How do I talk about myself? How do I showcase that I'm qualified? So women fall into this qualification pendulum, basically, where they constantly have to justify on that they have subject matter expertise. For me, this shows up. So I'll do a YouTube video and I cite data from Deloitte or the government. Inevitably, a man comes up and says, your numbers are wrong. Right? They're not even my numbers. The government numbers. The Deloitte, the McKinsey, they're whatever they are. And they say, well, you cite no sources of your information, therefore your information is wrong. So women are constantly being challenged on subject matter expertise, even when they're the subject matter expert, because that's just how society is being trained.
Yeah.
So women can't get to the visionary part, because when men are accepted as a subject matter expert and have the respect, you don't have to do that anymore. Then all people want to know from you, Andy, what's your vision? And how do we get to fulfill the vision? Women never get to that part, because no matter how long they're in the business, in the career, in the organization, they will be questioned every day on subject matter expertise. I mean, I sold a business to Bill Gates, for crying out loud. I mean, what are you're gonna ask me whether or not I know how to grow a business? But seriously, people still challenge me on, what do you even know? I'm like, track record? Yeah. So again, we falling back into these stereotypical behaviors, and without the awareness, we cannot change this.
Right.
So of course I'm going to be angry at men who constantly challenge me on this. I'm like, you dumb idiot. Do your research. And then what they're hearing, see, she doesn't know her stuff. See, she's talking out of her butt. She's just another one of those angry feminists who really hate men, who just cite the numbers based on her momentary anger at men to just unleash. I'm like, dude, hello.
Yeah.
But we're so in this.
Yeah, you're forced to play by the old male rules that don't even work for men. And then once you do, see, she's just a bitch.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, what? Yeah. So there's so many. And again, as you stay in these structures, again, nobody wins. They don't support us. And that's why I'm kind of like, in some level, it's all falling apart. So anytime I get aware that I love discovering I'm wrong about something. I really, and again, it took me a long time to get to this place, but I can't change anything until I'm aware of it. So when I realize, oh my God, I was wrong all these years, or I've been wrong for the last 5 minutes, whatever it is, I'm like, well, good. I'd rather be happy than right. But that's contrary to what so many people's experiences are.
Yes, because that comes with shame.
Right.
That comes with not being the subject matter expert. The subject matter expert's the authority on the subject. The authority on the subject is the alpha, right? So basically where you're going in is you say, well, they hired me because I'm the subject matter expert. So therefore what I say must be acknowledged as the ultimate truth. They promoted me. Therefore, they must believe I know everything. No, That's not why you got promoted. You got promoted because they see potential in you to become a great leader. They're not hiring you because you get everything right. They're hiring you because you have the potential to grow into something really great. So I like your point, Andy, about admitting a mistake. Why is that so difficult?
Goes back to fear. I'm less than a man. If I'm wrong, goes back to the oldest jokes about men. We won't ask for directions, right? Because someone will say, we're wrong. I got to admit, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? That's a scary place. Like we're taught, we're always supposed to have that mask on, that we know what we're doing. And if we don't know what we're doing, we got to put on even a bigger act that says we do.
Oh my God, I'm laughing. I remember, my former partner that I was talking about. So we were going somewhere and he missed the exit, and we all knew he missed the exit, but he didn't admit that he missed the exit. So we are all sitting in this car for an extra 30 minutes going in the wrong direction, all knowing that he missed the exit until he finally realized that we were getting pretty close to Big Bear, and we missed our exit. But you are absolutely correct. It is a sign of weakness.
Yeah. But it isn't. But we've been taught that it's a sign of weakness. It's what takes more strength than admitting you're wrong?
I agree with you 100%, because that is the strength. I don't know who said this quote, but the more I know, the more I know what I don't know, is that you really realize that no matter how good you get at something, there's somebody who's exponentially better than you.
Yeah. Every subject matter expert I know knows they're not the world's expert of it. And every subject matter worth knowing about, it's infinite. There's more to learn. Like, well, I want to be the subject matter expert of, the color red. All right, well, maybe there is a limit to that. And once I get to the limit of that knowledge I can have of the color red, I'm going to be pretty freaking bored. So subject matter experts that enjoy it, yeah, there's got to be more. There's got to be more to learn. And you can learn without judging yourself as wrong or weak for not knowing it all magically from the moment you were born.
Yeah, it's like when Santana was asked how he feels of being, the greatest guitar player, and he says, "I don't know, ask Prince," right? And
the masters know there's always a bigger master, a greater master. There's depth, and yeah, like ideally we all are comfortable in our lack of expertise, but it's a willingness to learn that makes experts, I find.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what? And I actually think that when you get to that level of awareness, for somebody like Santana to say, ask Prince on what it feels like to be the best guitar player, is that really shows the authenticity you were talking about, of the acknowledgement that at a certain level you don't need that anymore. It's not necessary anymore because you have done enough and you are comfortable with yourself that you say, I'm good enough for my fans to love me, but would I say I'm the greatest? You can call me the greatest, but I'm going to call my buddy Prince and ask him what it feels like, because I certainly wouldn't call myself that. So within that, I always said that when I was in photo production and photography representation, that the only artists or the only creatives that made this huge fuss about on that they needed their thing at a certain temperature, and then the motorhome had to be a certain motorhome, and they wouldn't go do this, and it couldn't be Coke, it had to be Pepsi or whatever that was, that they really were not at the top of their game. The people that are truly at the top of their game are the most professional, the most real, the most humble, and they don't need to do all this nonsense. Yeah. And so the day I learned that, it's a great little story. So I was a representative, and I was going with like 20 portfolios to a photographer. And this photographer was the first photographer for Vogue magazine. So, this is quite some time ago. And so he goes through all the portfolios and he looks and he takes his time and he says nothing. And then he gives them back to me and he says, any one of them will do. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm used to people going like, I don't like the way their hair falls. I can't believe she did that with the eyeliner. And he said, any of them will do. And what dawned on me, Andy, is that true leadership means that I can work with anyone because I am in charge and I can get anyone to perform at their most brilliant level, at their optimum level. And that's the day I decided, I said, that's the kind of leader I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that even from my own experience doing this and witnessing others, the more demanding you are, the more fragile you are. Right? Demands aren't coming from a place of expertise and strength and power. It's like, oh no, I'm going to be found out for the fraud I am. Or, oh no, everyone in the car realizes I've made a mistake, but I've got to keep acting like I know what I'm doing. And hopefully we go backwards somehow magically without me having to acknowledge it, But it's all to cover and protect ourselves and not be seen as weak and not be judged and not be ostracized. Because deep down, as human beings, we're all fucking afraid.
You're absolutely correct. Yes. And of so many different things. Yeah, I agree with you. This is just fascinating, and are you finding that the awareness amongst women, do women get it, what men are experiencing for the most part?
No, most women I meet believe the act. And again, as humans, we believe what we're presented with. Right? So they don't realize. I hear from so many women that listen to the show and go like, I never had no idea men thought this. I had no idea men felt this. And I'm like, yeah, there's whatever you feel, we feel. Whatever we feel, I'm sure that you feel. Right? We're different expressions, but the potential for everything, except perhaps childbirth, is in there in both sexes. We're not that vastly different that we can have empathy, that we don't have all the same emotions. They're just expressed differently. They can be felt differently. But to say they don't exist, that's to our detriment.
So how do we bring this to more people? How do we raise the awareness of the gender neutrality and the lack of judgment and the curiosity, I guess?
Well, that's one word. That's one thing that is. But again, embracing authenticity, rewarding vulnerability, rewarding curiosity, all those are things to do it. Like the conversation we had. If every boardroom could be like, well, how do you feel about that? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump always talks about his gut instinct. So he's an intuitive man. He can read a room. He can read people. He knows what works. But if you asked him if he was in touch with his feelings, I think he would laugh.
Everything about him is about looking weak.
Right.
So a lot of the action is, and I said this, and this is not a political statement, but I always said that as we're going through the men's code and the women's code, I said, Donald Trump is the classic example of a traditional alpha male, winning, competitive, doesn't want to appear weak, will come up with whatever he has to come up to be right, has to be right all the time. Doesn't allow any other opinion in his because it's going to make him look weak. I said, so those are the people that built the structure. Mm-hmm. That's why he fares so extraordinarily well in the structure, because it was built for someone like him.
Yeah.
And so he knows exactly how to operate within that structure. But everybody who's not like that has to inevitably fail.
Yep. And that's not the way. Like earlier asking, like, who feels masculinity is under attack? Well, that hardcore traditionalist that just sees it one way.
Yeah.
Because there's an infinite number of ways to be a human being, right? And
so you have then, so men then have the same issue that a lot of the women do. You're up against a tradition. You're up against the traditional lists that are, identifying what that means like to be a man. You are up against society that's significantly changing, especially with the generational shift. So it sounds pretty confusing to me.
Yeah, but I'm seeing more and more. I'm talking to guys in their teens, even 20s, 30s, that are open, and I'm seeing more men open to change at a younger and younger age.
Great.
And again, it's that pendulum is swinging, and the guys that are in fear and are so afraid of acknowledging fear, they'll get tighter and tighter and tighter, and everything's going to be a war. but I see the number of those guys shrinking. And I do believe before Trump's life is done, he'll have an epiphany at some level. Like it'll be through his kids, it'll be through Barron. Something is going to make that guy realize that he can feel. And I'm sure we're not going to see it. The public will never see beyond that mask, but I'm sure there's something beyond the mask.
Are you saying that he's going to pick up a pink telephone at some time?
I bet in the past he has for Ivanka. Yeah, I no doubt. If she had a pink phone, yeah. Or at least hire someone to do it for him. Maybe that's maybe that's more likely. I don't know. But so I know the book that you're working on is The New Business Code. And hopefully, I sure feel like we've been talking about that in an indirect way. But tell me about what you see as this new business code that is showing up, or you hope that shows up.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly along the lines of what you and I are talking about. I think what I took away, and admitting where I was wrong with some of my perceptions of the men's code, because I saw in the business world how that plays out in the business world, and it's just not very comforting. And the judgments I made as a result of it. And now recognizing that we really see this change and the softening, or maybe the allowing of the softening to be visible, right? If we rephrase this, right? And now looking at this and saying, it's not just the women that structure doesn't work for. It doesn't work for men either. And so if it doesn't work for women, it doesn't work for men, then it really works for nobody. And so how about we redesign this structure, which is why I call it the new business code, where we combine the men's code and the women's code, and we first identify what sort of the traditional origins of each one of these codes are and how they've changed over time and where we are with that right now. And then how do we take these two pieces where they are at right now, and how do we combine them? And so that when you visually think, these two circles coming together, we have an infinity sign. And so then the question, Andy, it's like, what is a good leader? The answer to that is it depends on the situation. So if I am in a crisis, then I know collaboration, empathy, community building is more appropriate. If we are in a hard charging competition, getting to market with a product before our competitor, now we're in a hard, in a competitive setting. So the hard male energy is more appropriate for that. So, and if I am a hard charging leader, now, if I understand what this new business code really is, now I'm going to make sure that my second and my executive leadership team has these different attributes that we are now choosing as a company to represent. And I have, I have this idea that instead of the mission and the vision and the core values, that we're adding the fourth element to it. And that is the definition of the leadership attributes we lead by. And the only caveat of that is they have to be balanced. They have to be female and they have to be male. And then we remove the label. Then they simply become the leadership attributes we lead by.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just what is, as opposed to what is labeled.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. I mean, we have to label it to figure out how to overcome the labels.
Yeah.
But then once we have a conscious awareness of how we are labeling it, then we can make the conscious choice to unlabel it.
Yeah. Here's what works for us.
Yes.
Great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is what our company stands for.
Yeah. Awesome. Beate, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I frankly, I would love to have more like these with you too. But what's the best way for people to learn more about what you're up to and where to find out how to connect with you?
Yes. So if you want to connect with me, go to beatechelette.com. And there's a contact form. I really actually love hearing from the audience, and specifically as I'm working on this new book. So if you hear something, you want to share something, please do share it with me, because I think this is an important conversation to have. I want to make an adequate representation of what I write about. And, you can check out the Women's Code if you're so inclined to. It has its own website, thewomenscode.com. And you find me on social media, on YouTube, all over the place. I I focus on workplace unification. I don't even call it DEI anymore. I call it workplace unification, for the reason that I even find diversity, equity, and inclusion already a label that I do not want to follow.
Yeah.
And so reach out to me. Don't be a stranger. And of course, I would love to be back and have more of these conversations, because they're so important to have.
Right. Yeah. And if you've stuck with us, if you've been listening, thank you. And if you made it this far, I believe it must be an important conversation to you as well. Or maybe you're that hardcore competitive traditionalist man and you've been hate listening. That's fine too. That's cool. That's fine with
Hate
it.
listening. I like that. I never heard that. Yes. I have a lot of hate watchers. Yes.
There you go. Yeah, turn them around, because they're listening. There's something behind that mask, right? There's some depth there, even behind the hate listeners.
Yeah. Yes.
So wherever you're discovering Real Men Feel, please subscribe, share this with somebody that would really benefit from it. Post a review, a comment. You can reach out to me at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Always love to hear from you. And if you want to talk about how to uncover your own code for living your best life, visit theandygrant.com/talk, and we can have a one-on-one conversation. Not recorded, just an actual conversation that's private. Until next time, be good to yourself.